Okay, bye. same year. This is also office towers designed to look like a European cathedral. It looks like a French Gothic cathedral stretched into a skyscraper. Originally built to be home to the Chicago Tribune newspapers, but you know, the newspapers are broke, so they had to sell their building. A better view of it on the way back in. We're under our first bridge, the Michigan Avenue Bridge. There is road traffic directly over our heads on these bridges. And we'll talk about the second tallest tower in Chicago, Trump Tower, on the way back in from the lake at the end of the tour, because it is front and center there and we don't have to crane our heads up. To your left, classical forms, but it's also inspired by Renaissance interpretations of classical forms, neoclassical forms. And it was built to be attractive to jewelers. It's called the Jewelers Building. It's on Jewelers Row in Chicago. Jewelers would bring their offices into this tower because it had a safety feature, a car elevator. For 15 years from when it was built, 1927, this had an operating interior car elevator. If you're a jeweler, you drive to work, pull into that car elevator, you can go right up to your level, unload your jewels and your assets, and you don't ever have to be on the street with them. The building, the Belvedere with the dome, was a restaurant that was a little concealed bar. When alcohol was illegal, it was a speakeasy during Prohibition. And the word is that Al Capone was the head of that bar. It's only a rumor because that kind of thing isn't written down in history, but there you go, it's a rumor that I spread. Let's talk about these round skyscrapers on the right. They are so spectacular. They're really the unsung heroes of Chicago, in my opinion. They're from the 1960s. They're by the architect Bertrand Goldberg. Sounds like more drama on the river. Boat's honking. And they're apartments. You can tell by the balconies. The building will tell you it's apartments because they've got balconies. This is Marina City, and nobody calls it that. We call it a super cute nickname in Chicago, the Corn Cob Towers. Makes perfect sense. It looks exactly like corn on the cob during July 4th. The top section, balconies, apartments. The bottom section, parking. Mandatory valet if you park in their parking area. Tight little spirals all the way up and down. And if you notice, ahead on the right, where it meets the river, there is a full marina. And at the street level, there are restaurants, like a steakhouse. There was also an ice skating rink when it was built. There's still a bowling alley, the Chicago House of Blues, all in the base of this building. The name is Marina City. It's a city within a city, rising up from the waters. This building is, to me, the architect and this building is visionary. In the 60s, nobody was thinking of this river as a beautiful place to be yet. In the 60s, this river still stunk. It was nasty. It was basically a big sewer in the middle of the city. But this architect saw what was coming. Look around you, there's people kayaking on the river. It would have been hard to imagine back in the 60s. We'll see more work by Bertrand Goldberg, our circle guy, later on in the tour. By the way, the only residential tower visible right now is a brand new building to your left, the ice blue building with the cutouts for balconies on the left. That's 111 West Wacker. And for the most part on the main branch, it's offices. And you can hear, even on a Saturday, hustle and bustle in the main branch of the river. We're on the main branch. So it's quite quiet. It's Saturday morning. Up ahead, look at these people on a pack raft on the left. Have you seen that? Up ahead on the right, let's talk about this low red brick building with the clock tower. Notice it's very different than everything else around us. It's an older building from 1915. It's called the Reed Murdoch. It was built to be a warehouse. Now it's offices, of course it is. This building is a different style of architecture, a style that's very low, flat, close to the ground, and horizontal feeling. Prairie school, flat like a prairie. This is a local style of architecture. It's horizontal lines, and even decorative motifs that are reminiscent of grain. They have like crisscross geometric patterns that look like a sheaf of wheat on that building. Prairie school architecture is a local style of architecture, an American style of architecture, inspired by where we are. This is the Midwest, the big breadbasket agricultural plains of the United States. And buildings are inspired by that flat prairie. The most famous prairie school architect, Frank Lloyd Wright. He's probably the most famous American architect of all time. Frank Lloyd Wright, you can see at the top of the flat columns, by the way, those crisscrossing patterns that looks like wheat at the top, the seed head of wheat. Frank Lloyd Wright was a Chicago architect for decades of his career. but you can't see his buildings on the river. You have to go out into the suburbs like Oak Park to check them out. If you're an architecture nerd, if that's why you're here, check it out. There's a museum. It does require appointments in advance. We're going to see another local style of architecture up ahead of us on the right, another red brick building that looks older than everything around it. And this style of architecture is called Chicago School architecture. Chicago School basically means early skyscraper architecture. When skyscrapers were new, we were building tall buildings into the sky. How should we make them look graceful? The answer in Chicago School architecture is like a column. To your right, the red brick building from 1924 is like a column. It has that stone base to meet the ground, a central shaft drawing your eye up in the middle, and a top to reach the sky. It's such a simple concept, the three-part design of a column, but there you go, this is Chicago School architecture. The building says the Chicago School has nothing to do with the architecture style that it actually is. It's referencing the interior, which is owned by the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Weird coincidence. That was the Helene Curtis building from 1924. Get your cameras ready, because we're about to get a face full of building on the other side of this bridge, on the right of the boat, off to starboard. The largest building in the world when it was built, boom, the Merchandise Mart. 4 million square feet of space, 2 city blocks long, 1 city block deep. Now the Pentagon is bigger, of course. But this is the Merchandise Mart from 1929 by Graham Anderson, Probst and White, and let's look at the architecture style first. Notice on this building, vertical lines racing up, windows, setbacks at the top like a staircase into the heavens, verticality. We got geometric decoration like the diamonds at the top and the bottom of the building, almost machine stamped. It's that kind of futuristic Art Deco style. Very popular this year, 1929. We're going to see a ton of Art Deco buildings on this tour from the same exact year, 1929. And I'll tell you about the history of this building when we pass it, including why these big red green heads are outside of it. So just put a pin in that. But the Merchandise Mart is a very wide and broad example of Art Deco. We'll see much more vertical feeling, that kind of streamlined, futuristic feel of Art Deco later in the tour. And on the other side of this bridge, which is where supposedly there was a person, there's a police boat on the left here docked in the water. But you never know, man, you never know. All sorts of weird stuff happens in this river. We're about to enter into the main branch of the Chicago River. Excuse me, I lied to you. This is Wolf Point. We're exiting the main branch. The river branches off here into a Y shape. To the left, the south branch. Around the bend to the right, the north branch. That's usually where we go first, depending on traffic. And man, if you have been here before and it's been a few years, this place looks completely different because this blue glass tower on the right, the blue glass tower under construction on the right, the brand new blue glass tower directly behind it, the blue glass tower ahead of us, the blue glass tower to the left, and the blue glass tower to the left of that are all just 2 to 3 years old. By the way, what do contemporary skyscrapers look like? They're blue glass towers. I call them ice cubes. It's kind of a safe bet aesthetically in terms of looks because these buildings do a good job of reflecting the city and the weather around them and disappearing into the sky. And to your right, you can see it under construction. That's normal in Chicago, these low-flying things. To your right, this is Wolf Point South under construction. Nobody's working on a Saturday here, but sometimes it's very noisy. Oh, there's somebody working. Hey, sorry, I lied. This is Wolf Point South. This is an office tower under construction. Usually it's much more noisy, clangy, and lots of action. But this will be just under 900 feet tall. It'll be twice the size of the building next to it, which is Wolf Point West. Wolf Point West is residential, so is the building we already passed, Wolf Point East. This whole complex is by the architecture firm Pelly Clark Pelly. And again, 2 residential, 1 office tower at Salesforce Tower, under 900 feet tall, currently under construction. Super fun to see. And you can see it's residential. There's somebody doing yoga. All right. Hey, good morning. Over the trees. So quiet. By the way, what used to be here where there are 3 skyscrapers being built? A parking garage. That's the old river. Again, we used to devalue the river, think of it like a sewer, leave your cars there. You don't want to smell it, you don't want to live on it. But now, everything's different. It's a recreational waterfront, like I said, there's people out here all the time, it's super busy. Straight ahead, super cool, lifted bridge. This bridge is permanently lifted. No, it's not broken. There are no customers left for the railroad tracks that this bridge has, this railroad bridge. The last customer for this railroad bridge was the Chicago Sun-Times. That building was, well, that newspaper doesn't exist anymore. But that, hear the train? Those same trains that would have hit the tracks here. The Sun-Times doesn't exist anymore, but their building was where the Trump Tower is, so it's torn down for Trump Tower. And they used to ship big newspaper rolls, unprinted newspaper, across this railroad bridge. So that was the end of an era when that newspaper shut down. If you look up while you're underneath it, you can see the railroad tracks. That's the Kinzie Street Railroad Bridge. And to your left, you can see how low the bridge is and why it's permanently lifted. No, it won't get torn down. That would cost more money. Instead, we leave it up as a type of sculpture. Get your cameras out to your left for my favorite building, the funny nautical river cottages. 4 townhomes right on the river. By the way, I told you we'd use our noses. You smell a chocolate factory? They're working on Saturday morning. But let me talk more about this building. The river cottages are from 1989 by Harry Weiss. They're 4 townhome units, all owned by their original owners except one, which was sold for $2.5 million a couple of years ago. It's still under construction. I'll get back to that when we get back to it. But now we're in a pretty quiet residential neighborhood, and it's a weekend morning, so I'm going to hop off the microphone. If you want a chance to hit the bar or the bathroom, it's going to be quiet for a couple of minutes. We're going to turn around on the North Branch here and head back south to the South Branch. I'll be back on the microphone at the bridge. And if you have any questions, I'm going to walk around and you can wave me over and we can have a chit chat. But the chocolate factory is just about 2 blocks in from here. Longers. They're a cocoa producer, so a bit of our industrial history on the river right there, that old pink building. To your right, little sliver of a building that curves with the river. This is Riverbend. It's in the name, Riverbend. The shape of the building, the form of the building is referencing its context. This is super popular in contemporary architecture. They call it contextualism. Buildings designed for where they are. Riverbend is from 2002. Residential building, obviously. To your right, this ice cube of a building on the right, this is River Point, brand new, just I think 2 years old, 2019 if I'm not mistaken. It's got a cool red sculpture out front on the right. That is by probably the world's hottest superstar architect right now, Santiago Calatrava. This spiral-shaped design has elements of, to me, fire and feathers, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, like Chicago, the second city built on the ashes of its fire. I'll tell you more about the fire later, but I love that sculpture. Love, love, love. To your left, cameras out, if you'd like to get this nice, they call it the canyon of skyscrapers down the main branch. Cool view. And let's also look at, you can see the tower crane reflected in this green curving facade here on the left. That is 333 West Wacker. This is a lot of people's favorite building in Chicago. It's from, it's a road, Wacker Drive. This is, ooh, we got more trouble. There's a boat right in front of us. Oh my gosh. Okay, so 333 West, the river's empty and people are still acting fools. So 333 West Wacker on the left here. Green building, green like the river. Curving building, curving like the river that it's on. It's a beautiful example of contextualism by Cohn, Peterson, and Fox, the architecture firm from New York City. And let me point out, it's from 1983. I could have told you it was built 2 years ago and everybody would still be happy. People basically still build like this. Contextualist, classy facades since the 1980s. That same architecture firm, Cohn, Peterson, and Fox, built another skyscraper to the left here that I like to point out because it's the only purple skyscraper I've ever seen in my life. This is the Ernst & Young headquarters in Chicago. That building's from the 1990s, and it is simply a delightful purple glass skyscraper. Let's talk inventory, and if you look around at the newer construction on the river, you'll see they all have these intentional riverwalk buildings, or buildings. This is by the architecture firm Getch Partners, and this kind of visible structural engineering is another hot trend in contemporary architecture. Visible structural engineering. Kind of showing off what you can work around, basically, as an architecture firm. Now, ahead, on the left and the right, we're going back in time to 1929. We've got vertical lines of Art Deco, the setbacks, a throne shape on the left, and actually this building on the right was inspired by the shape of the Sphinx in Egypt. You'll see, this is the noisiest bridge on the tour, Washington Boulevard. Inspired by the Sphinx on the right, believe it or not. And that, again, kind of geometric, futuristic feel of Art Deco. To the left, this is our opera house, the Civic Opera building. No, it's not misspelled, the building. In the Latin alphabet, there is no U, so they use a V if they want to be fancy. Very fancy opera house. And on the right, this was the Chicago Daily News building. And look, there's somebody working up there on the exterior of the building, washing windows. That's a job you can have, my friends. I love seeing those people. So these were the typical skyscrapers of the late 1920s, the roaring 20s. Lots of money, lots of skyscrapers got built. And then 1929 hits, the stock market crashes, and people stopped building skyscrapers in the United States for like 2 decades because of the Great Depression of the 30s, and of course World War II in the 40s. Nobody's using steel for skyscrapers during wartime. When economic recovery happened in the United States after World War II, people started building skyscrapers again in the late 40s, and they don't look like Art Deco anymore. They look completely different. They look like this. The plain steel glass box of modernism. We're now in the modern era. This building is from the 60s, Gateway 1 and 2, these twin buildings here. But there are buildings in Chicago that look just like this, built in 1948 by the architect Mies van der Rohe. His quote, "Less is more." He's called the father of the modern skyscraper. He was actually from the German Bauhaus, was kicked out by the Nazis during World War II and became a Chicago architect. And he's the person with the concept of less is more who completely changed the way skyscraper architecture looks. Now, less is more became the quintessential style of the 40s, 50s, and 60s skyscrapers. These buildings are not Mies van der Rohe buildings, and they look just like his. They're by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, Gateway 1 and 2 from the 60s. Eventually, though, people did get tired of building the same glass box over and over again. And we moved on to a slightly different style in the 70s. This was Gateway 2. The white building is Gateway 3. Oh boy, what a big departure from the glass box, huh? What do we have here? It's steel and glass, just like the Less is More buildings, but oh yeah, decorative white concrete, yeah! This is called international style. This is, again, super plain, less is more is the ideal. Boxy style of modernism, it's still modernism. And it's called international style because, hey, if you've traveled the world and you've seen a lot of different world cities' business districts, you've seen that building over and over again, haven't you? It's kind of context-free. And that is what inspired, from the 70s, Gateway 3, the shift, that era shift towards contextualism in the 80s. So this was Gateway 3, the green building is Gateway 4, all by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, and that's from 1983. We're clearly done with the box here, although we're heavily inspired by it going from it. We got a curving facade, like the curve in the river up ahead of us. Green glass like the Green River. Look at the reflection of the white building in this building. It looks like you're looking at it through water tunity and a blank slate as a city. Chicago rebuilt, and rebuilt really well. There's a masterpiece of urban planning after the fire called the City Plan in 1909. It's considered to be a response to the fire. And I'll tell you more about that city plan later, but essentially it's responsible for much of the beauty and wonder that we've experienced already together. But also something else after the fire happened. I mentioned 17,000 buildings were destroyed, and that attracted somebody to move to Chicago. Imagine you're an architect and you read in the newspaper that an entire city has burnt down. A booming city that's on the rise. You might want to move there for work. Yeah, that's what happened. Architects moved to Chicago from all over the country and internationally. And this is the moment when Chicago became kind of America's architecture city. And it set the scene for 20 years after the fire. The skyscraper got invented here in Chicago. This is the birthplace of the skyscraper. So Chicago then rebuilt using skyscrapers. And that's why the city looks like it does today. That's why we're all here on this boat ride together right now. It is all because of the fire, because of the horrible collective trauma that was gone through by the city that then people rebuilt from. Well, you know, the survivors then thrived with an incredible second city. That's why Chicago's called the second city. One of our nicknames. We also have Paris on the Prairie. I like that one. Or how about this one? Hog Butcher to the World. Ugh. Yeah, that's real intense. That's Chicago. So, speaking of skyscrapers, there's one, our big guy, standing at 1,451 feet tall, or 442 meters tall. That building is called the what? I like hearing both answers. Thank you for participating, everybody. You all get a gold star and an A+. There are 2 correct answers to that question. It's a trick question. Sears Tower, Willis Tower. Why? Well, if you're talking to any locals, you're probably going to hear Sears Tower come out of their mouth. Right, locals? But if you look on a map, the official name of the building today is Willis Tower. Just be aware of this cultural little bit of interest. It is officially named Willis Tower, but truly, verbally, it is almost unanimously called Sears Tower. So what do you think I call it? I call it the Sears Tower. So the Sears Tower was built in 1974 by the architecture firm Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, them again, to be the Sears corporate headquarters and to be the tallest building in the world. Until the 1990s, when the Petronas Towers were built in Malaysia and became the tallest buildings in the world. They're not anymore. But that made the Sears Tower become instead the tallest building in the country. Yay! Okay, so why on earth would anybody call this fire the best thing that ever happened to Chicago? Well, first of all, we would never choose the fire. That is not the point. Elements back to it. So in this case, like a Greek temple stretched into a skyscraper. Just a beautiful building. To your right, this piece of land here was brownfield, which is a nice term to say that it was toxic from dumping. But now it's been ameliorated enough that it is being developed into a park. It will be Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable Park, named after our first settler. And by the way, if you guys like bike rides, Chicago's a wonderful place for a bike ride. It's completely flat. Swamp on a prairie, that's what Chicago is. And if you look at these cyclists here and these joggers and stuff, this flyover here, this bridge, this is the most, dense part of our 17-mile long uninterrupted lakefront trail. So hop on one of them blue bikes, get to the lakefront and enjoy the trail. Just people are so nice for the most part. It really makes my heart happy. Just watch out for rush hour if you take a bike ride, because rush hour is just like on the roads on the lakefront trail bike path. He is the architect of the tallest buildings in the world, like the Burj Khalifa in Dubai right now. Adrian Smith is a Chicago architect. Smith & Gill, he's in his 70s, and he's the person who built the tallest buildings in the world. Now, Trump Tower is an excellent example of contemporary architecture, the Ice Cube, if you will. The building is contextual, very contextual. It was one of our first major Ice Cube buildings to come in with this light blue glass that disappears into the sky. It simply takes up less visual space than it would if it wasn't light blue like this. The building also has setbacks at different levels. The first setback on the right is at the roof line.
cheese. Maganda.
Ayun.